starting the next session, which is the venture capital panel. It is the closing panel for the pre-conference investor forum. And since I come from a fintech background, I do come from a background of investments and retails and all. So I found it appropriate to have a good friend of mine to moderate the session. He himself is an entrepreneur, and he's also been mentoring startups, but obviously from the fintech context as well as from the property context as well. Tanvir Shah, a good friend of mine and a wonderful gentleman from the Partnerships Advisory. He is the managing director for the Partnership Advisory. Tanvir Shah will be moderating a panel which is called Venture Capital and Healthcare Ecosystem, Shared Goals and Innovation. My sentiments with Tanvir is the same because both of us come from the fintech background. So that's a little, so our sentiments are kind of similar, but I'm happy to introduce Tanvir and the audience to Tanvir's panel. We have Dr. Louiza Chitour, the program manager for HealthTech at Plug and Play Abu Dhabi. I have our Investor Forum Conference Chairman, Dr. Dirk, Richter, the Senior Advisor and the Director of Health Sector Innovation for the Department of Health Abu Dhabi. And I also have the Chief Executive. Oh, and I see Dr. Sophia Pathai. Interesting. So there you are. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'd like to reintroduce Dr. Dirk, and this time Dr. Dirk has a tag team partner who is Dr. Sophia
Abu Dhabi,
venture partner for Peppermint Venture Partners. She's she's based in the UK, but thank you very much, Dr. Sophia. She's out here in Abu Dhabi with us, and that was a surprise. And Rashed AlSuwaidi, a good friend, Chief Executive Officer for Avantologie, our supporting partner. So, Tanvir, over to you. You have a wonderful panel. The next 50 minutes, it belongs to you and to your panel. Over to you.
Thank you, Fahad. Pleasure being here on the panel with everyone. An interesting space. We do a lot of medical real estate and hospital real estate. This is how we've sort of been involved with the changes that are happening in how hospitals and medical care and healthcare functions. It's very interesting to see that a lot of technology is enabling changes that will make life easier for everyone. And the panel is very relevant because, as Fahad mentioned, a large part of my work is around finance. And we've seen a lot of technology being enabled by venture capital, which 20 or 30 years back did not exist. So this is a great space that has come in. But venture capital also have their own view on the returns. They're always looking for that 10x, 100x story. So, my question to the panel, and if we can start with, since we've got two people here with Dr. Dirk and Dr. Sophia, if we can start with you guys on your thoughts on how is VC influencing technologies that make their way in the healthcare system? Is it the right impetus that you are also looking for? Is there things that could change or should change? Appreciate your thoughts on that.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Tanvir. I think I'm a physician by training, and so I think I have that insight of what's meaningful to clinicians, but I also appreciate very much what's valuable to the health tech ecosystem. And I think now I'm in a venture background. What I do look for is, as you say, the fast return or the quick return, and knowing that we're going to get a multiple on our return. So there can be some incongruence in what we look for. So maybe the tech that's really relevant in a hospital ecosystem might not always be what is the right venture for us to play into. So I think we have to be mindful of that incongruence. And at the same time, think about tech that is maybe very innovative, maybe in remote monitoring, for example, the invasive remote monitoring. I'm an ophthalmologist. We think about placing devices in the eye all the time. It's very exciting. It can enable new ways of thinking about patient treatment. But at the same time, venture might not find that an attractive investment because ultimately, who is the patient that's going to use this? And more importantly, which part of the health system is going to reimburse and pay for this as well? So there are many factors we're thinking about alongside the patient journey in venture. And I think this is where we have to be mindful of all the different stakeholders in the system, and of course the patient at the end of it. Dirk?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes not of course not in all the cases. Sometimes health tech takes a long time to the market. First of all, it needs a lot of maybe even basic research to get started, and then it takes approvals and all of it. So sometimes, of course, making quick money, having a quick exit, and health is not a perfect match. So maybe a role, that's what we are thinking about in Abu Dhabi, to fund early stages, to help them to get the first steps done prior to being interesting for investors. So some of the things that may be very beneficial for patients, for community, for health in the long run, take too much time to be attractive investment targets. That may be an issue, and then of course we need to find ways to deal with it.
Sure. Thank you very much for those thoughts. And I'll get back to that government angle as well. And it's really good to see Abu Dhabi and the Middle East government supporting where perhaps VCs cannot at the beginning. Dr. Louiza, would love to hear your thoughts on the VC angle on health.
I hope you can hear me. So I'm just going to play devil's advocate here in kind of zooming in onto the venture capitalist role. So venture capitalists in every industry are inherently risk takers because they make bets on technologies that are completely misunderstood, completely new, and changing the way we consume, changing the way we see an industry or a way of doing things. And that comes with a set of risks when you come and disrupt healthcare, because at the end of the day, the risk is on patients' health. And that's why I think venture capital, I would say, has a role in really pushing the boundaries for traditional health stakeholders, mainly the providers, the regulators, and the insurers, to rethink new delivery, new like healthcare delivery, like ways to deliver healthcare, ways to reimburse it. So that's why it's kind of challenging. This is when we might see the divide between how a regulator sees that technology and how a venture capital firm would see it in terms of pure potential and how it can disrupt the industry in the future. I don't know if that makes sense, but those two views are not necessarily, aligned, and that's what creates friction.
Thank you very much for bringing the word friction up. We'll touch on that later in the call as well. Rashed, you've been a serial entrepreneur. You've done quite a few ventures. Your thoughts on venture backing and the capital versus society or goodness kind of play? How is that stepping out in the health tech space?
Yeah, thank you, Tanvir, for having me, and thanks, Dr. Louisa. I actually agree with you. Actually, venture capitalists would act as an R&D extension of hospitals. And if you look at passionate people who started startups and would like to be heard and to have their products and services being implemented, they seek VCs to connect to hospitals and to influence that patient journey. Because as we know, every human being starts his life in a hospital and moves along the way, and that's really important to have that innovation, innovation from different various people with experience to be implemented and funded for the world to listen and to feel and to use. So I think that's really important, and connecting both of those would help hospitals and the health tech to renovate and progress. So that's my insight on that.
Sure. Thank you, Rashed. So we truly have a global panel here with Dr. Louisa having spent time in China, Dr. Dirk, and of course, of German background, Dr. Sophia, London, and Rashed having spent time in California in the heart of Silicon Valley. If I can ask each one of you to share your sort of global versus local experiences, since this is the Middle East Health Summit. How do you see the Middle East venture ecosystem or the capital ecosystem, government, venture, or traditional capital, investment and investment theses versus what you see in China or in London, Germany, or California. If Dr. Louiza, you want to share your experiences in China, which is leading the way in digitalizing all industries, including health.
Absolutely. And I think I always tell that to my friends. I relocated to the UAE in 2015, and I kind of pick up the same signals I picked up in China around 2010, 2008, 2011, where really that curve really started, like the digital disruption and revolution happened in China with the Alibaba and the Tencent, which are the two largest companies that created ecosystems. And I think the model, the Chinese model in how they see digital disruption is quite unique, because from very early on, they understood the importance of interoperability and having one, like all services in one place. So if you go on WeChat, you'll be able to not only book your train ticket, pay your bills, but also book a teleconsultation without leaving the app. So that in terms of user experience, patient experience, as well as doctor experience is way frictionless. Now, whereas in the West, I would call it, there's like a fragmentation of these services. And that's why the digital adoption is not as fast. I've seen it like firsthand in China, that like when you create these ecosystems that are seamless, that are easy to use, not only you consolidate the data and you improve the accuracy of these services, but you also allow a better patient experience. And that's why even pre-pandemic, the usage of digital services by doctors and patients is the highest in Asia, not in US, not in Europe, but in Asia, because that mobile phone, that piece of technology is ubiquitous and is an integral part of their daily life in China, for example. So that's why I think from that standpoint, I see that happening in the UAE with the Karims, with the like the acquisition of Soup by Amazon. Like, granted, those are different industries, but like the same mindset applies. Consolidation of technologies, having a seamless experience, and trying to have interoperability at the center of it, so that you offer like a better patient experience.
Sure, thank you for sharing that. And what I noticed is something very similar to what we notice in other industries as well, is that the UAE, in some sense, is maybe a few years behind the curve, but in some sense, we see this as a huge opportunity, because when you're convincing VCs, you know that this works, that there is a demand for it, that patients are looking for it. There is a roadmap sort of in play. We just have to adapt it to local sensibilities and local regulations. Thank you very much for that. If we can move to our European friends, if you can share how things are shaping up in Germany and London and elsewhere, if you have a background there as well.
So I focus on ophthalmology venture capital. So maybe it's pertinent if I share my experiences in that arena. So in the US, it's typically, to Louisa's point, pretty risk averse. So it's generally people like VCs who all know each other and know the founders, and choose products and assets that are maybe going to reach a market pretty quickly, but the innovation is a little more like behind the curve. And then I think about experiences in China with Israel. So we have groups like Rimonchi Capital in China who partner extensively with Israeli founders, and they are really at the very cusp of innovation, creating amazing surgical and therapeutics in ophthalmology that are, really, the mind boggles about the degree of technology involved. And I think Peppermint VenturePartners is headquartered in Berlin, and we're also in London. We're kind of in the middle. So we see a lot of deal flow across Europe, and we're trying to harness that innovation and take it forward. But what I've actually experienced here, and I'm actually with Dr. Dirk in Hub 71, is the energy around wanting to build relationships within the entrepreneurial setup, but also with regulators, with payers. And I think it's bringing all those stakeholders together with a common theme and the direction of travel all together moving forward is what I see here. And that's why I'm very excited about the possibility of venture in ophthalmology in the MENA region, and particularly in the UAE, because I think this is where it's going to be next.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, the two deals Dr. Louiza already mentioned, Souk.com and Kareem, of course, a significant change in the market and perception of investors, that there is, of course, an opportunity of really impressive exits. I think what we need to do is to have a more systematic approach. I mean, those are two really flagships highlights. However, I mean, this systematic way of starting academic research, translational research, commercialization of products, so that you always have a pipeline and you have amazing research entities that always produce those innovators who commercialize products. That's something what we try to build in order to make it more systematic and have a continuous pipeline. I think that's the difference between US and Silicon Valley and the European centers, where you have this systematic approach, but grown for a number of years. But we are used to being much quicker and keeping pace with international development. So I think we're on a good way to do it, but still you need the full value chain in order to have continuous flows of new innovation and deals and then exits, of course. So I think that's the difference. It's those systems we're just talking about have developed throughout a number of years, while we're trying to catch up within a few years only. But I think we are on a good way, looking at many countries in the UAE and around.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Dirk and Dr. Sophia. I appreciate those thoughts. Rashed, if we can move to you, you've lived and partially worked at the epicenter of venture capital in California. What have been your experiences cross-border, halfway across the world here in your home country, in the UAE, and the way it's progressing?
Well, to be honest, it's two different worlds, and to be honest, it's a new age, so you cannot judge. So with every new innovation, this technology 4.0, health tech is popping up all around the world. It's all about the different maturity. And as you know, in Avantologie, we specialize in data. So what we believe as a data centric approach, that data has the potential in helping health providers in creating lower risks and avoid sicknesses all over the world. But we are looking at different places. Maybe Europe is different or China is different, but it's all about how mature are they on making that seamless connection between the patients and the patient service providers, going from insurance to health, the health sector, hospitals, or whatever. So in a nutshell, you cannot compare. The UAE is taking initiatives in many aspects and innovating the whole technology part in health tech, like what Dr. Louiza mentioned, the super apps where everything will be embedded in just one app that you could do and track all your which basically they combined the human with the phone and made it the representative of that human being. So connecting it to the health sector would be a greater addition to his life. It's making everything seamless and easier to connect to that. So in a nutshell, I believe that we are in progress as the Middle East, not just the UAE, and the Western world. So it's just a different maturities, Tanvir.
Sure, thank you, Rashed, for that. And of course, Abu Dhabi has taken quite a lead over the last decade, even with bringing Cleveland Clinic here. So the health of the people has always been at the forefront from the founding father, Sheikh Zayed's vision as well. If I can bring, so from the VC perspective, there is, as we spoke earlier, urgency and a speed to their returns that they want. Whereas one of the reasons Fahad invited me to this is I'm very well known in the finance world of saying one of the reasons, or there are two industries that are closest to human heart: his health and his wealth. If a person's health or wealth deteriorate, it affects not just him, but the generation before and the generation after as well. No wonder these are two of the most regulated industries in the world, and two areas where the patient or the customer or the user is most fearful of unknown new technologies. So the VCs were very happy to fund disruption of how you buy your milk or your cookies or your t-shirts. It's a bit different when you come and say this, really crazy new science is going to probe into your liver or your kidney. Or as we see in the world of finance, if for high ticket items, if you want to finance your home mortgages are the slowest to adapt to technology. It's all fun and games to have a nice app and do funky stuff on video. However, when you get down to really, what Dr. Sophia also said, stuff that boggles your mind, that boggles the patient's mind as well, right? He's scared. So how do VCs view that? Disrupting buying milk, you can sell that to a VC, but when you go and say, what, we're going to do this operation on someone's heart or brain in a very unique, different way, and suddenly the whole market is going to pick it up. How do you convince VCs about market uptake and market acceptance? And in that, I will include regulatory acceptance, because the regulator is essentially an appointee of society, right? He's just representing the society. So the sort of friction, to use Dr. Louiza's word, between what the VC wants versus what the society is ready for. How do you see that playing out in different markets, both mature and the ones that are initiating change as we speak? If we can start with Dr. Louiza, who brought in the friction angle to open with, on your thoughts on how VCs are digesting the speed to market or market acceptance.
I think, probably I don't have a complete answer for it, because it's such a complex problem, and it's still, I don't expect it to disappear because of the complexity and how high the stakes are. A human life is literally the most precious thing, and everyone around the table would agree with me. Now, I think it's more a question of how have we been able to assess the success of those digital and those new solutions. So far, there has been very little data, because before that, when you have a new technology, then you have clinical trials, then you have extensive cycles of validation for it to become a standard. But now the technology moves so fast that there is a lack of these evidence in, like, let's call them randomized controlled trial environments. That is still lacking. And now there is some emerging in, let's say we have a diabetes app that promises you to take control of that diabetes. We can, to some extent, measure the outcome, the healthcare outcome, by measuring the HbA1c levels over a certain period of time. Sorry to be technical, but basically how to measure the improvement of the patient's health in a controlled environment and compare it to patients that didn't use that app. So I believe that once we have a framework to really test these technologies with the help of clinicians, with the help of regulators, it really will give more confidence to investors, to the public, to the end user, to use these technologies and move away from this gimmick. Because I think for a lot of clinicians today, or some regulators, or even some industry players, these technologies are gimmicks and not really serving the patients, and not really having a tangible outcome on the patient's health. So I think once we solve that equation, we would be able to see more of that. And another point is, for every startup out there, it's great to have a technology, but to have in your team a clinical mind, or someone from a clinical background to help you, to advise you, is really key, because you need to know how to speak to those, how to really show the value in terms of pure health metrics and not financial metrics, because then you'll have a different pitch for different stakeholders. For clinicians, you really need to show them, is my patient gonna be better? Is it gonna reduce burden on me? Is it gonna reduce costs, or like reduce waste? If it's yes, then he's gonna be willing to listen to you. But from a financial perspective, let's say you're talking to a board of hospital, you need to convince him that this technology will reduce his waste and will improve and generate new revenue and capture more people and more patients. So I don't know if that kind of answered your question, but I believe like validation is really key to decrease this impression of high risk when we talk about technology in health.
Yes, it does. It does give a perspective, I think, to our listeners and our audience as well. Thank you very much. Dr. Dirk, if we can have your thoughts on this topic.
Yes, of course. I mean, actually, of course, we have one problem. We have to deal with small startups similar to big pharma or big medtech when it comes to patient safety. So we cannot just approve products or services because it's a small startup. They don't have much resources to invest in clinical trials. We just approve. So we have to have the same standards, same requests, same requirements to approve them like we would have for big medtech. So that way, somehow, really big medtech corporate companies compete with startups. So that's, of course, something we need to solve. I mean, what we try to do is, of course, and very closely working with Dr. Louiza and Plug and Play to create settings where technology can be tested in a really controlled setting. I mean, sometimes if you look at it as a regulator, and you look more at risk than at what kind of regulation, you can create POC settings that may help. But still, I mean, for investing in something like this, it's still a challenge since, regulation is of course something that is more important in health than elsewhere. I mean, there are certain ways to do it, and of course, involving clinicians is important. But at the same time, I mean, everybody loves innovation. We love to support the economy, but in the end, the patient safety, lives are most important aspect for us. So that's of course something we cannot completely solve, but try to at least find some ways of supporting those products to be tested, and then in a small scale and maybe later in a larger scale. The other thing is, of course, I mean, the track is quite clear. I mean, we have well-defined ways of getting approvals from phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials and all of it. So on that point of view, the track is quite clear, but it can take time, and from that point of view, it's we cannot fully solve it.
Dr. Sophia, any insights on this aspect?
Well, I echo Dr. Louiza and Dr. Dirk's comments about patient safety. I think that's really at the cusp of everything we're going to do. But having said that, also to Dr. Louiza's point, you know, it's really useful to have clinical insight. And so in many healthcare VC firms, there are clinicians or PhDs who can apply scientific thought. And so I think, you know, patient safety is number one. But when you look at proof of concept, you can evaluate that internally within the venture capital firm and to get an internal read. But also we have a big external scientific advisory board comprised of many KOLs and thought leaders throughout the world. And it's very important for us to get their validation and their understanding of the proof of concept from them as well. And I think those two enables us maybe to take these innovation leaps. I mean, again, if I think to ophthalmology, you know, Avastin or bevacizumab, the biologic used for many cancers was actually, you know, used by an ophthalmologist to inject into the eye for macular degeneration in the retina. And, you know, we wouldn't have really, this would be a huge innovation leap that people wouldn't have thought about maybe 20 years ago. I mean, when I was in clinical practice still, we didn't do this. And now this is the mainstay of treatment that many patients receive. I don't know how many millions of injections are probably done per week around the world. So I think it's trusting the proof of concept. It's being mindful of patient safety and getting validation from a variety of trusted sources that enables us to move forward together.
Yeah, that's a good example there. Thank you, Dr. Sophia, for sharing that with us. Rashed, if I can bring you in on your thoughts and insights on this element of the VC funding.
Yes. Well, first of all, as we all know, we just came out of a pandemic individually and collectively that doesn't happen in 100 years. So what we learned from that is there are proper decisions that we have to take in the tech sector and the health industry. One of the problems that we face were like limited med supply and equipment supply and simple allocations of of medical staff, for example. That's on the hospital side. Apart from dealing with the patients, going from shortening the patient visits, shortening the risks on the patients, and all of that, plus extensive diagnosis. Have you ever went to the hospital twice in a row and they did the diagnosis twice also and wasted 2 hours of your time? So these things should be taken care of, like with proper data collection. And if you look at the AI industry, health tech industry in terms of AI, it's growing yearly in a huge amount. And as I think I saw one statistic saying that yearly it's growing as 40%, reaching around 600 billion USD. So that's a huge amount. I mean, like you mentioned, we have to regulate it before it goes out of control, and we have to trust the technology part in health tech. So that's why VCs are really important in that area. So I mean, it goes all back to the question: is technology important in the health industry or not? So from what we saw in the last 2 years, having the pandemic and other health issues that that came up with the pandemic, it turns out to be very important, and we should really focus on investing our time, like you said, wealth and health into that. So that's my point of view on this aspect, and I believe that there's a greater opportunity rather than being scared of the risks and the speed of the tech industry moving to the health sector. So we have to cope up and learn how to innovate in it and regulate it at the same time.
Thank you, Rashed. Appreciate that. And as you said, on the health and the wealth, there are a lot of similarities. As
Yes.
Dr. Louiza also mentioned, life is of paramount importance, and life is only worth living with, I think, good health and good wealth in the bank. So what we've seen during the COVID, thanks for bringing up the COVID and the pandemic, we've seen an acceleration in almost all industries on digitalization and VC capital funding that digitalization and data-driven decision making. So in the health tech as well, are there any prominent examples that you've seen over the last 18 months where things that would have we've seen it in edutech, for example, education going online and digital was supposed to be a 5-year, 10-year plan, and which needed to be done in 15 days. So if anyone wants to contribute, please just sort of raise your show of hand. If you've got any specific examples on how the whole pandemic experience has helped bring a lot of capital to the right needs within the health sphere. Any thoughts, any examples? All right, Dr. Louiza.
I want to start and then let my esteemed colleagues join me. I would definitely say, like, I know it's a very cliche sentence that we've said, but it is true. Like, COVID has been the CTO, the most effective CTO for a lot of organizations in terms of speeding up the uptake and digital health adoption. Now, why is that? It's only in times of need where we certainly looked at telemedicine services and remote patient monitoring not just as an add-on or luxury, but is the only way we had for a couple of months, and we didn't know how long that would be. So how do you care for your diabetic patient, for your patient with cardiovascular diseases, and you do not want to put them at risk by coming to the hospital contracting a potentially deadly disease, which is COVID? So in this context, I think it rapidly changed the mindset of clinicians that had these tools at their perusal to follow up with patients. But I think, and also regulatory, like the authorities that really saw the importance of, opening it up and having a more flexible approach on what to allow and not to allow to ensure that digital health actually happens. But I would say for me, the biggest shift is on the consumer base or like patient basis, meaning the necessity of taking ownership of your own health. meaning not to get sick, meaning to prevent, to have all this information, access to information about your health, taking ownership of your health, and preventing yourself from getting really sick. And I think the combo of these wearables, using IoT sensors, using like mobile apps, is really what's going to change the game, because from a very young age, Gen Z and below, they are born with those tools, and they want to use them to take ownership of their health, to be informed about their health status, and then consult and use them to basically avail health services that they would avail by face-to-face consultation. So I think those were the biggest shifts I noticed, even though I just like to point out that like we've seen decline, there is still steady decline of telemedicine use since there is reopening. So it's important to factor in like what is a fad and what's here to stay in terms of healthcare services. And I think that's why even VCs need to have a close watch on, what's really a quick fad and what's really there to stay.
Sure. Thank you very much, Doctor. Appreciate your thoughts. If anyone else has any thoughts, we can jump to that or the next question that has come up for Dr. Dirk. Yes, Dr. Sophia.
So I fully agree on the aspects of remote monitoring, and I just can give an example. One of our portfolio companies is called Implant Data, and they actually did implant into the eye a sensor to measure pressure in the eye for patients with glaucoma. Now, the majority of patients with glaucoma are over 70, and it wouldn't have been sensible for them during the pandemic to be coming to outpatient clinics where they'd be exposed to the virus. And so what this company were able to do actually is show that over a period of 6 months last year during the pandemic, that patients who had these devices implanted were able to have their pressure monitored, remotely at home. And there were no differences in standard of care or changes in glaucoma parameters compared to patients who'd been seen in clinics. So this was then published, and it really, I think, set a precedent to say that remote monitoring is something that can be done well, can be done safely, and that there is patient adoption. So I think what made me laugh is that they gave 20 patients over the age of 70 these iPads and the monitor, and I think they got 18 back, which means that two patients who are in their 70s got free iPads out of this. But I think what's important to know is that, to Dr. Louiza's point, is, okay, this works, but will it stay as the kind of standard of care? And will it be embraced and adopted by the patient and by the healthcare system? Because let's not forget, in some healthcare systems, the doctors get reimbursed, or the healthcare system gets reimbursed for measuring the pressure, or for measuring the visual field. So we need to take all of these extra parameters into account when we think about adopting new technology, and how our other stakeholders feel about what it means for their well-being and their finances too.
And that's by the way, exactly the question we have to ask ourselves as regulators, as insurance companies. Now, I mean, all of us would have loved to meet in person during those days. We cannot, since there are certain reasons why we cannot. And it's the same with healthcare. Of course, there's a good reason for healthcare professionals to see patients from time to time in person. However, at the same time, we learned during COVID-19, there's of course a good reason not to do everything in person. There is no need to come to the clinic or hospital for everything. And now for us as regulator, of course, we always have this issue of overutilization. The easier you make access to healthcare, the more people will maybe have an appointment with the doctor every day online, since it's very easy. You only have to press the button. Now, for us as a regulator, and we also insurance companies somehow in Abu Dhabi, since we pay for healthcare of the UAE nationals from government budget. So we really have to find out. And first of all, merge two systems. We don't want virtual and physical care, but we need one system. And to find indication medical diseases, as well as cases where we can really use virtual care and use all this technology, and of course support care by technology, and others where we need to see to bring the patient to the doctor, or the other way around. And I think that this is exactly what we need to learn from COVID-19. It's the same for education. Probably it's maybe not the best way to do online education only. At the same time, there's a strong case for online education, at least supporting. So that's exactly what we need to think about. And since money drives the market, it's about policies, but it's really even much more about the question, how do we reimburse? How do we create a bundled payment for something which combines physical as well as virtual care? And this is something, yeah, where we need to learn from COVID and take it forward for more patient satisfaction, to really fully utilize technologies. I mean, if you look at healthcare, the utilization of technology is still very low, so a lot of potential. At the same time, yeah, it needs to be well customized for the patient, and finally reimbursement is probably key to drive the market.
Yes, we do advise a few insurance companies as well, and usually they say that the real roadblocks are the regulatory landscape or the healthcare providers. So something for all of us to learn, and I think there's a good work happening across the world and in the UAE. Dr. Dirk, we'll have you continue with the commentary because there's a question that has come up for you. You may have seen it there. And whenever we do a venture panel, it's almost we're counting the minute till someone talks about Bitcoin or artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
The buzzwords, but with a group of doctors and qualified people, I'm hoping that there's some real artificial intelligence stories that you have either from DOH or even from your portfolio companies, if Dr. Sophia or Dr. Louiza want to share. And then, of course, Rashed, will get your thoughts on artificial intelligence as well, because the best and simplest use case of that is statistical analysis in large chunks of data and big data. So if each one of us can comment on how new age artificial intelligence investments are being are supporting the health journey. Dr. Dirk, starting with you.
Yeah, I start not talking about investment, but first of all, how do we prepare as government? And at least for Abu Dhabi, I can say we know there's a lot of knowledge required. It's totally different from all the things we have done in the past. So nobody really is qualified to do. So what we have done already is to create a digital center within Department of Health. So first of all, we created a platform for all kind of applications, telehealth, but I think we are very much aware of the fact that we need to be specialized, need to understand, and also need to somehow set some kind of standards to with all those digital technology, including AI. So we have really created a digital center within Department of Health, led by people who don't do anything else than working with digital innovators and everybody all day, so they can help to shape policies, but also really engage and see what Abu Dhabi as a healthcare system requires. And so that's our answer, to really specialize, to look into the future and say we need a digital center in order to keep pace with the market.
Thank you very much. Rashed, would you like to share thoughts on how data mining and data sanctity is being supported by the latest technologies, and you may want to share how your firm is also helping this initiative.
So if we want to speak about like you said, the new age and the supporting AI supporting the health industry. So, and you come from banks, I believe. If you go back to banks and you look at what's happening in banks, is they're trying to put a bank in people's pockets, and they're supposed to not to listen to the customers or the patients or the citizens, but observing the needs, behaviors, and experiences. So if you look at it from a government point of view and saying, okay, you have to standardizing the data or building centers or building policies or building applications, and then what we're looking for is how can we serve the patient better? How can we serve the customer better? How can we serve the citizen better? So this is the requirement of the patient, and this is what we can deliver. So from my experience, from what I can see is we have to look at it from a data center perspective, and we have to shift the roles of the health industry in being, like we said before, a servant back to a servant healthcare experience, and make it as seamless as we can with the adoption of AI, blockchain, and other new forms of technology and data products.
Sure. Thank you, Rashed. Appreciate that. Dr. Louisa, your thoughts on the latest technologies and its application, any companies on your network that are doing interesting work that should be shared?
I think I might go off script here in terms of like the future of technologies, and what I see really disruptive is the way the level at which we're zooming in into health, meaning we're looking at a personalized health experience that takes into account where you come from, your genetic makeup, your environment, to be able to have a tailor-made treatment plan or drug. And that's the future. That's really what excites me in terms of future of healthcare. We're actually working extensively on that with the Department of Health of Abu Dhabi to really look at technologies that, beyond the app, the companion app that you have, and beyond the telemedicine services, what more can we do? How close can we get to the patient to really deliver the drug at the right time with the right dosage to the right person? And the ideal here is to move beyond healthcare and move into a preventative model where we are able to detect the populations that are at risk and really change the environment and change all these factors that are around them to prevent the onset of that disease. And I really think that's kind of the disruption that is coming in the future. And I'm really excited about that.
Thank you. That's a good way towards the closure of this panel. If we can ask, yes, so Dr. Louisa, you already mentioned what excites you and what keeps you energized for the next decade. If we can go around the table or the digital table that we have with the other three panelists also sharing what excites them, what are the great opportunities that we are seeing, and we can move towards closing the panel with those optimistic comments. Dr. Sophia, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really empowerment of the patient journey at all steps. So really going from, at home or remote monitoring or even preventive technologies before that, and then in the clinic, and devices and therapies that can really allow patients to be accountable and to be empowered in their treatment and in their patient journey overall. So a lot of energy for that.
Thank you. Dr. Dirk, what are the most exciting things?
Sorry, yes, two things. One is, of course, the potential of genetics as an additional source of information which we didn't have, and the other thing is data. I mean, we are navigated in a very foggy environment for hundreds of years, to be honest, and now we are really have the opportunity of getting additional information. And of course, the ability to analyze and work with data, big data, in a way we never did before. And this will give the strong changes to therapies, to the healthcare system overall.
Thank you very much. Rashed, the most optimistic parts that you see?
More of is how can we make healthcare highly productive and like reduce and increase the healthcare for those patients at the same time, and reduce risk, because we've been hearing a lot of surgery mistakes that have been happening for the past years, and how can we adopt the new technology and AI to reduce those risks and make the patients happy to go to the hospitals rather than scared. That's I think the purpose of hospitals. So I mean, to close on that, I think we're going for a brighter future in the health tech sector, especially with technology and data. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Rashed, for those optimistic comments. I think a happy patient, a healthy patient, I think is everyone's goals and society's goals. Medhat Al-Masri has made a comment on an innovative initiative he has on cardiovascular disease prevention. For everyone who's got ideas that they would like to reach out or get special commentary on from the panelists or even myself, please reach out on LinkedIn. You may also reach out to me on my email. It's visible here in my background. All the panelists are on LinkedIn, and happy to receive your personal thoughts and commentary and pitches on there as well. With that comment and invitation for a lot more innovation and hopefully quality VC funding in the region, we wrap this panel with a vote of thanks for all the 4 panelists who've taken the time out to share their thoughts and insights. Thank you very much. Fahad, over to you.
Thank you, Tanvir. Thank you very much, Tanvir. I'd like to request Dr. Dirk to say a few words in closing. Over to you, Dr. Dirk.
Thank you. Yes, I think it has been amazing and very insightful day. All of us around the same table, investors, people, users from healthcare, regulators, plug and play in a role, accelerating as well as investing, and many others around us. I think a lot of insights, a lot of connections, and yeah, I'm looking forward for the next 2 days. It's a different scope, but hopefully some of the people being still with us. And yeah, closing for today and looking forward to tomorrow and the day after.